thanks everyone for joining us here. So we're going to be, the three of us are going to be talking about tagging today. So now I assume most of your conversations or like some of your work conversations at some point have been like, no, you created this, look at this tag, or maybe something like, oh, I wonder when was this particular server or application created when there's ID audits happening, the battle of ownership, if you will. So if this sounds like your work conversation, I think you're in the right spot. So today, my colleagues Jemima, Alicia, and we're going to be walking you through some of the fun stuff with respect to tags. Well, not the air tags that you know of, but tagging with AWS. So we're going to be talking about what are tags, why you would want to use tags, and how would you enforce them with AWS services. And then there's also a bonus which talks about a custom solution, which talks about event-driven automatic resource tagging solution. That is, if your customer has particular business functionality requirements. So we're going to talk about what are tags. So tags are essentially key value pairs that capture the metadata for your AWS resources, which enables organizing. Now, with most of AWS resources, you have an option of creating adding tags when you're creating the resource. So tags can essentially help you manage, identify, organize, search for, or filter resources, essentially help in facilitating governance. Now you can create tags to categorize your resources by purpose or owner or environment or any other criteria that is specific to your business organizations. Now, before we move on, I did want to throw some light on why you would want to use tagging. So it gets incredibly hard to manage your AWS resources without tagging, more so when you're scaling. So it is essentially a tool to manage and report on your resources. Now, like I mentioned before, each tag has two parts, a key value, a key and a value. So now both of those are case sensitive. Just something to keep in mind when you use it. And there's no such thing as too many tags. You would want to use too many tags rather than having too few tags, if you will. So now if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So at AWS, we recommend using the following tagging categories to help organize your resources. The first one is technical tags. So technical tags such as like environment version or application version can describe the function of a particular resource, for example, your application. As you upgrade or make changes to your product, these tags can help you keep a track of the history or version changes as you upgrade. And then there's automation tags, for example, the date and time that are associated with your application or resources. They can be used to identify when a resource should be started or stopped. For example, your EC2 instances, you could run an automated start or stop script to turn off your development EC2 instances during non-business hours, for example, to help reduce your costs. So, and then there's business tags, which covers identifying who is responsible for a particular resource and what cost center it should be allocated to for tracking and visibility purposes. And then there's security tags, which covers the level of confidentiality your resource supports, or what level of compliance should your resources be adhering to, given the requirements that your business organization might have. If we can move on to the tagging strategies. All right, we're there. So here are some of the common tagging strategies based on the categories we've discussed before. The first one is resource organization. So that enables you to organizing your resources in the AWS console. You can configure your tags to be displayed with the resources, and then you can search and filter by tag. You can create groups of AWS resources based on one or more tags, or maybe like a portion of tags. You can also create groups based on their occurrence in a CloudFormation stack. And then you can also consolidate and view data for applications that consist of multiple resources or services or even region at a single place. The next strategy is a cost allocation one. So in AWS, you could use AWS Cost Explorer and detailed billing to break down the cost by tag, for example, the business unit or the customer or the cost center, or as a matter of fact, project 2. Then there comes automation category automation strategy, which is essentially opting in or opting out of automated tasks, or to identify versions of resources you would want to update or delete or even archive as you're growing. For example, like I spoke before, you could identify instances you want to start or stop by tag. And then there's access control. So the tags within access control, you can define a strategy which essentially restricts access to specific resources. For example, like a sensitive customer database, you'd want to tag those resources with the access control strategy using the IAM policies. Moving on to resource groups. So resource group is a service that lets you group resources across services within AWS. For example, when you create multiple resources related to each other, you can create an application identified by a matching tag across resources. That way you can manage your entire application in a single place. Another example would be if your environment includes, say for example, a Lambda function, you can view the status of Lambda function in a single console instead of having to navigate to the separate Lambda function already. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Alicia to talk about tagging in AWS.
Thank you, Saswata. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia. I'm a DevOps consultant at AWS. As you've been hearing from Saswata, we've been talking a little bit about tags, how they relate to things, especially in AWS. And then I'll be talking a little bit more about specific services that can help you tag your resources, again, specifically in AWS. And we'll be looking at tagging strategies across multiple accounts, not just in a single account as well. So first, before we get into it, I wanted to just touch base on tagging governance. So there's two types of strategies we can talk about when you're tagging within AWS. Some services will help you have proactive governance, which applies these tagging policies before you create your resources. So if you try to create a resource without a tag, then it won't even let you create it. Or we can have reactive governance as well, where you can create a resource and then after there's some configuration that will help you realize when something is not configured correctly, then it'll help you retroactively tag your resources. So as for specific services, we'll be digging into several that we have listed here. We have AWS Organizations, AWS Service Catalog, and AWS Config. And so all of these services will help you ensure tagging compliance across multiple accounts, in a single account, and yeah, we'll just dive into them a little bit more. So for AWS Organizations, so this service will help you centrally manage your environment across multiple accounts, and that's by creating an organization. So you have your management account, you have several other accounts that join your organization, and you can group them into units and apply policies to each unit. And some of these policies can be related to tagging, both while you're creating the resource and after you've created the resource as well. So when we're talking about organizations specific functionality, we can be looking at both tag policies and service control policies. So tag policies can be used only for tagging related policies, of course. In these policies, the tag key and the value need to match with your tag policy. And you can use these to maintain standardized tags across all of your resources for specific accounts in your organization. So it'll help you maintain consistent tags. Then when we're talking about service control policies, they will accept any value with a compliant key. They basically manage the permissions in your organization. They don't grant permission, they just manage what you can do within your organization. So if we're going to be using tag policies and service control policies together, we can say that specific accounts can't create a specific resource if it doesn't apply to a tag policy. So within organizations, you can create an organization-wide compliance report, and you can also monitor these events using CloudWatch events when non-compliant tags are introduced. Then we'll move on to Service Catalog. So Service Catalog is a way where you can create and share and organize infrastructure templates across multiple accounts. So this is for pre-approved templates that you want to distribute out to multiple accounts. And the way that Service Catalog can manage tagging for you would be using auto tags or tag options. So auto tags are tags that, like the name suggests, they identify information about where a resource is provisioned or who has provisioned this resource and automatically applies Service Catalog tagging to those resources. And then for tag options, this is another way to manage templates for your AWS tags. So again, you can make sure that they're standardized across accounts. So we can use tag options again with organizations tag policies, but a limitation to point out here is that, again, this is going to apply to pre-approved templates for self-service, not ad hoc requests. So if you have a developer that's trying to create a new Lambda function or a new EC2 instance, and there's no, they're not using a infrastructure template out of service catalog, then this is not really going to help in that kind of situation. It'll just be for pre-approved templates. Finally, we'll be talking about AWS config. So AWS config provides a detailed view of configuration of your resources in your AWS account. So in one single location, you can see the compliance of multiple resources. This can be tagging. This can be other security related things that you specify as well. The great thing about this is this also integrates with organizations, and you can deploy custom compliance rules in a single account, and you can also deploy them across accounts too. And you can view all your compliance in a single dashboard. So if I wanted to deploy a compliance rule across a whole organization, then in my management account, I can see, oh, account A is compliant with other tags. Account B has maybe 3 or 4 resources that aren't. The thing about this service, though, is, again, you can see all the compliance in a single dashboard, and it can provide remediation as well, but this will require a little bit of extra setup on your behalf. So just to summarize, since I know that was a lot of information about a lot of different things, we have this little service comparison table. So just to really quickly summarize, we have organizations that will help you manage your multiple account environments, proactive governance type. You'll have to manage your auto remediation yourself. For service catalog, this is for infrastructure sharing, so for templates that you've already approved. This is another proactive strategy where anything that you create already is going to have that resource tag. This doesn't apply to ad hoc infrastructure, of course. And then finally, for AWS config, we have a service that will help you manage your compliance rules, again, both in your account, across accounts. This is a reactive strategy where you can see that something is non-compliant and then create remediation around it. But this, again, is also self-managed auto remediation. So if we're looking at something that will help you with auto remediation, then we're starting to look at something that will be kind of needs to be custom built. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jemima to talk about a solution that might be able to help you with your business needs.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm Jemima. I'm a senior cloud consultant with AWS. So with that, let's move on to what the custom solution is. As Alicia was talking about all the out-of-the-box solution which AWS provides for tagging, the proactive and the reactive, there might be some situation in your use case where you need to create your own filters, and you also would be able to manage any ad hoc resources which is getting created. As a developer, you can come in and then you, if you want to just go ahead into the console and create a Lambda, there is no, the service catalog would not be able to stop that. So it's not because it's not using that template. Config, if it is not configured for that resource, then it won't be able to stop that as well. So you might want to have like additional filter condition and additional tagging perspective depending on your business use case. And no worries, that's where this custom solution is going to help us out. And this custom solution uses the event-driven architecture, and it uses all serverless. So it's AWS manages those resources for you, and using the existing building blocks which AWS provides, we have put together this custom solution, and that's the architecture we would like to walk you guys through. So let's say there is a member account, and this member account, developer comes in and creates resources such as Lambda, ECS, DynamoDB, name it, like any resources that organization is want to create. So those gets created, and in AWS, whenever a resource gets created, those API actions are logged in CloudTrail. So leveraging that API, we're going to send that event to EventBridge. So the EventBridge will listen to those CloudTrail events and then assumes a cross-account role and then passes that event to a centralized account. So the centralized account is going to be the meat of the solution, because that's where it is going to have the centralized event bridge, where it is going to listen to all the events which is pertaining to your filter condition. It's going to listen to all that event and then passes that event to a Lambda. So it targets that Lambda and it passes the event. So now the Lambda is going to listen to that event, and it's going to parse through that event and understand where that information is coming from, because the event is going to have what is that member account detail, and it is also going to have your resource ID. So those are the primary two main points which the Lambda will look into. After it gets that information, it's going to assume a role to describe that resource onto that member account. And once it is describing the tags or the resource information, it is going to look at the metadata, and it is going to see that that has a tag which is going to confine to the compliance status, or does it not have any of the required tags which the business wants it to have. So by describing it, it is able to now come up with this list of information, whether it is compliant, non-compliant, or is it missing tags. And in the Lambda, we can define those rules as a configurational parameter and then apply those non-compliant tags remediation as well as a missing tag remediation to that resource. So it's going to leverage the same logic of assuming the role and then updating the tags onto that resource. And after we have done the remediation, we want to see the status of the list of events which the central account has gotten. So the Lambda, we can log those events and the actions into a CloudWatch and leverage the CloudWatch dashboards to review what are those member accounts, how many events came in. Let's say that you have a need to determine how many EC2 events happened, and out of those EC2 events, how many came with the compliant and how many did not come with the compliant tag. So in order to group those, the dashboard is going to be definitely helpful in this situation, where the logs is going to be translated into the CloudWatch and you will listen in there. And that will also give you a perspective of which business entity is creating a standardized and required tags, and which business entity needs additional training in order to allow them to go ahead and update their resources. But the auto remediation will also help those business entity to automatically remediate, relieving the tension about, okay, I haven't done this, or I have not updated my template, because the Lambda is going to automatically remediate those resources. You can also include additional filter condition in your Lambda to determine if those auto remediation needs to happen for certain business entity, because there could be some situation where you do not want to have an external Lambda update certain resources in certain businesses, and all those filter conditions can be handled within your AWS Lambda. So it is going to remediate only for certain accounts, and it doesn't have to remediate for certain accounts. So all those conditions can be configured as a configurational parameter in your Lambda. On the status of your Lambda, that it will send out email notification using the SNS. So if a Lambda fails, or if there is a failure, those kinds of event can be grouped together, and that email can be sent to a developer group. And the list of statuses, like how many by account, how many got tagged and not tagged, those kinds of information can also be subscribed to a business entity, and that could be sent to a business entity user. So you leveraging the SNS, and then the Lambda can trigger that, and event information can be sent to the end user. So now we have seen this strategy between one member account and a central account. We can add n number of accounts to this architecture, because it's going to follow the same strategy of leveraging the API, CloudTrail event, listening in the event bridge, and sending it to the central account. So now the meat of it is living inside the central account, and you can keep adding multiple accounts as it comes into your business group. So hope this architecture gives you a roadblock. It gives you a building block of how to resolve your roadblock of like tagging if you have your own filters. And all these filters can be configured within your Lambda, and Lambda can be written in Python, in Java, Node.js, any language which that entity is comfortable with. And given all these filters are going to be configuration driven, it gives you a left shift programming, where those rules can be defined by a business or a product owner, and the developer it's all visible, and it's a more readable form of configuration. So it is more straightforward and open it to left shift programming, and the same solution can be customizable for different business use case, and you can have an add-on to your existing parameters, which will help you to solve the tagging in your organization. So so depending on the use case which you have, either you can use the existing out of the box solution which the AWS already provides for you to organize your resources by business, or in order to go one step above, and if you want to have these custom solution, you can combine all the building blocks which AWS provides and create your own custom solution with keeping your Lambda as your centralized resource which does your tracking as well as updating the resources on the fly. By this, you will be able to maintain compliance on your organization, and having a compliant solution is always good for multiple reasons, as Saswata was pointing out with the different categories which AWS provides. So that's what we have for you guys today.